I'd like to talk about the intention with this presentation. It's not a presentation about the content in terms of how to use it and work with it. It's more of what it is and how you could use it. So it's not a training in a say, and it's more of what are the experiences that we've had and how is it constructed and what are the thinking behind that. So the agenda that we're going to follow is more of going back and looking of why did this book come about, and what's the history about it, and also what are some of the principles that are important that we build upon when we have written and worked with this book. Also like to connect this to other material that we have on at Barry Center. It's a book called Get Connected, and that's also a free download, and I'll tell you how that is connected to the Dynamics of Change book and material. And then we will have Christoph come in and share some of the stories of what's going on and how you have used it, the Dynamics of Change at Volvo. And hopefully then at the end we usually have around, or usually we had another meeting here earlier this week, around 20 to 15 minutes of questions and answers. So please be prepared to ask questions if there are anything. Well, getting started then, I think what I'd like to say about this is I mean, we all live in a world of changes, so change is not something that is coming every now and then. It's more like a way of life. And the key thing that I have learned is that we are usually not that developed in our understanding how we as human beings react to change. But we do have very natural reactions to protect ourselves in the world that we live in. And life becomes much more easy if you as a leader and you as an employee in the organization are aware of these patterns and reactions and the needs that you have in order to maneuver yourself in this changing environment. So that's hopefully the main reason why we would like to share this book. I'd like to start with the story then of why this book emerged, and it started in mid-late 90s when I was working at a company called SCA Hygiene. And it was a large organization at that time with about 15,000 employees, and I was working as a change management advisor and reported directly to the executive team at that time. And in the mid-90s we were facing some severe challenges. We were asked or forced to have to take out half of the number of employees, so 7,000 people had to be either divested or closed down or had to be leave the company, and that was a huge change. And the CEO at that present moment, he was very aware of the human aspect of this. He was not only a left-brain person, if you call it like that. So he consciously came to me and said, Tor, I need to have something like a simple checklist that you could have like in your pocket and bring up, and so that you remind yourself about what is needed for us to think about from a human perspective. I thought about it for a moment, and I thought that must be impossible to kind of capture everything like that in such a small short document. But still I said, yeah, I'll think about that, I'll come back. And at the same time, I've also been running together with a colleague, a consultant, external consultant, a psychologist. His name is Kalu Plank. For a number of years we worked with a program inside the company called an action learning program, where leaders were bringing their own cases with them to these courses or programs, we even call them, where we helped them to understand themselves in relation to the challenges that they were working with. And in most of those cases it was about moving, changing and developing the organization. So there was a lot about change, and they had a lot of questions, and we saw that these questions were very similar in a way over the years, and that was also kind of a seed that started to grow inside of us, that we need to have a document that provided them that basic knowledge that they were already asking for. So these two things, this request from the CEO and our experience of the Action Learning Program, was actually the base from which the book was born. And since then, Kallio Plank and I have been using the book individually and also together with many different leaders in a number of organizations, and we have rewritten the book, and this is actually the third version of the book where we have updated and brought in new insights and learnings and reshaped and included other material. So it's a living document from the mid-90s, and so it's not a completely new document. And I even would like to say something about the time when I was at Volvo. We were facing some severe challenges when the financial crisis hit the market I think it was in 2008, 2009, and we were forced to take drastic actions and had to let go a big number of people in a very short time period. And at that time we used the dynamics of change as a source or as a base to train both HR professionals and our leaders in order to be able to take on the more human aspect of the change. The result of that was, and reaction was very positive, both for people who had to leave, but also people who had stayed, and that's very important. I mean, there are many different stakeholders in times of change, and leaders and owners are one group, but people in the organization are maybe the most important one. How do I actually keep the energy and focus and trust up in times of very turbulent times? And we learned that the book actually provided what is necessary for you to understand and know in order to make that work. So having said that, I'd like to take you to the next picture. We often talk about change management. It's not that often we talk about transformation management. Maybe it's not as well-known message. I worked quite a lot to create a language about change and transformation management, and talking about that, it is very much important to build up a shared language in the team that you work with on how you take on both change and transformation. Change to me, or to us, is what's happening outside of you as a human being. I mean, it could be new customer demands, new sales. I mean, sales could be falling, like in the downturn. It could also be a need for organizational restructuring or politics and so on. All those things are happening outside you. I call it above the surface. But there's also a journey of a lot of things that happens inside of you, and that's the journey below the surface. And in order to take on the change and be energized through that change, you need to be able to understand both what are the reactions, but also how do you lead and take on those things, if I can call them, or what happens inside of you as a human being. And if we don't, we actually detach ourselves from the people that we lead, and they don't trust us, and they don't believe in us, and they won't follow us either. So that is a principle that is really coming throughout the whole book, and it's something that we built upon when we worked with the book. So if I talk about the reason why the book actually has been written, what is it, the purpose of the book? It is, as it says here, is to improve the awareness and understanding among leaders, but also among employees, give a language and pictures that helps you to better understand, so you can talk about the things that are happening beneath the surface inside of you. And it also is a book that is written to create space for reflection and learning, and that is very important to have with you. So how we as human beings react during change is one aspect, but how we also, what we need in order to move in times of change is time and space for reflection and learning. So that's also something that I'll come back to and talk about how that is built into the book and the whole material. The other thing that we would like to do is that it's very easy to talk about the theory about things, what is the thinking and what's the reactions and so on, but we would like to offer practical tips and tools that makes it possible to have those kind of dialogues that needs to take place to engage and involve people to embrace the change that they are facing. So you can say at the end of the day is really to make the thing below the surface of the iceberg, the intangible, much more tangible and manageable. So if we look at the content of the book, Dynamics of Change, there are 10 different chapters, and the first 3 chapters is more elaborating on what I just told you here, the difference between change and transformation. But it also brings up some of the challenges that you face as a leader. I mean, you have to remember that during times of change, you are also personally affected. You may be unsure about how things are and where you're going to come out and what's going to happen to you and to your employees and the organization that you've maybe spent a long time to work with and build up. So that is a lot of challenges, and we bring up a few of those very important challenges. We also talk about that change is something that takes time, and it needs time in order to transform. We talk about transformation takes time, TTT, which is extremely important to be aware of as a principle as well. And as I mentioned earlier here, we also bring up the importance of how you as an individual and also how you as a team can work to create a learning environment in the times of change so that you can actually move and transform together through knowing more about how we learn. So those are, I would say, more of kind of theoretical overview around change. Then we have 2 chapters, 4 and 5, planning and communication, which is more of above the surface, if you may. How do you actually plan for the changes that is ahead, including then the aspect of what's going on beneath the surface and how your employees and the human reaction would be. So how do you marry the tangible above the surface planning, change management, with the planning of transformation management that is brought up here, and how do you communicate that, and what are the key things to think about and be aware of during times of change when it comes to communication. Then we have 2 chapters which is more about how we as human beings react, and here is where we talk about the change curve, or the stress curve, or the loss curve, or the possibility curve. That curve has many names, and you can choose the one that you'd like, but it's a reaction, and it's very, very predictable that we as human beings go through that change curve when we face change that we feel are threatening or make us feel not safe in this place where we are. So we need to take ourselves through that, and we are talking about how you as a leader then can both recognize the change or those reactions and identify where you are in that change curve. And as a result of that change, you may have a lot of stress, so we bring up and talk about how stress impacts you as a human being, and also how you as a leader can think about how you can work in order to reduce stress during times of change. Then we have 2 chapters, firm leadership and building a foundation for change, and those 2 chapters are more looking forward, or more how could I act to build up more confidence and trust in times of change, and also what are the things that I can build long term when there is not that much change at your place at the moment. You can build a foundation to be able to take on change, and here is what I would say the Get Connected book that we also provide is actually an extension of this chapter, because that book is talking more of how you build up a stable and strong and trustful culture. Then we have chapter 10, which is 10 exercises, which I will come back a little later on to more in detail. So I'll leave that for the moment. Another thing that we had in mind when we wrote the book was that we would like this book to be give you space as a leader for reflection, and so that every page has a shaded linear space on either left or right side of the text to give you space for you to write in your own thoughts and ideas and reflections as you read that. And we also added some keynotes into that to make it possible for you to speed read the book if you want to and find maybe some chapters that you have read about. So it's kind of a highlight one. I don't recommend to only read that, but that's if you are stressed and want to kind of get the feeling that you can actually read those notes that we have there. We also have added at each of the chapter ends with some reflective questions, 4 to 5 different questions that makes it possible for you as a leader to connect to your own situation after you've read something. Questions that makes you stop for a while and think about what is my own challenge, how much do I have, what is written here in my consciousness and under my control. So it's a book that we recommend that you read slowly and you stop and reflect and connect to yourself. And it becomes actually better and better if you are making notes. So next time you can read it, you can read and remind yourself of the thoughts that you had before you had the change, but also then if you read it later on, you can also add new experiences into it. So it becomes better and better every time you read it. I personally read the book prior to every major change that I'm faced with, either as a consultant or leader, but also as an individual, because it gives me a good reminder of what I already know. And even if I've written it myself, I still go, oh yeah, I remember this one. I need to think about that. And so it helps me to become better at taking on the change. And remember that in times of change, we become very much more narrow in our thinking. And it's good to slow down then and get reminded of things that you already know. So I recommend that strongly, that you do that. Now, we also had now then at Volvo at this time we had the dynamics of change and we had Get Connected as well, and our leaders came back to us and said that it's good that you have this book, but I need to understand how it actually fits into to change management as well. And what we then did is that we married the major, the different change management phases are more detailed usually. We've made 4 bigger groups of changes here: the initiation phase, the planning phase, the execution, and the closing phase. And the initiation phase is really where you set up the stage where you get prepared for the change that is coming, and it's a vision, and that's why it's a star to illustrate that. Then you have all the things that needs to happen in what kind of sequence and so on. You prepare for the transformation. And then you have the real execution, usually the longer part where you actually go through and execute it. And then that's where you really connect to the new reality that you are facing and building up the new structure that you would like to have. And you also have that time of letting go of what you have. And then you close the session, and it's very important that you run and close. We used Aaron Antonovsky. He was a professor in medical sociology, and he looked upon health in times of change in people. And what he came up with is something that's sometimes called sense of coherence, that it's important for you to understand how you actually can take on the change that is coming. And he was talking about 3 things which we married into this process, and that's more the human aspect of it. We need to have comprehensibility, meaning that you are able to predict and understand what will happen. If you're not able to understand what's happening it's very difficult and also very unlikely that you're going to be taking on and embrace the change, but also be feeling welcoming and embracing the change. So you have to understand, and there are activities that you can do and tools that you can work with to get more of understanding of how much you understand of what's happening. The other thing is manageability. Antonovsky talked about the manageability, that you have the skills and the ability, and that you have help and support, and you have resources and everything necessary so that you can manage and be in control. And if you're not feeling that you're in control, it's very unlikely that you're going to, again, embrace change. The last of the three that Antonovsky was talking about was meaningfulness. And he also said that this is maybe the most important of all these three, is that you think that it connects to what you think is interesting, and it satisfies you, and it gives you meaning. Personally, I can see myself in the future and how that will be worthwhile for me to do this, and it makes sense for me to aim for what we're doing and so on. And that is maybe the most difficult one, but it's also the most important one, as I said. We then added the last one, which we have found a very important one, and that is really to end things. It's very easy. We have kick-off meetings, but we not as often have closing meetings. And we found it's very important that we close. So we call that new energy and direction. That's the heading of that. If you think about it, I mean, all religions have some kind of rituals and some kind of ceremonies that is to end things, like a funeral, for example. And it may be that it's important for us as human beings to be able to manifest the ending of a change that we have gone through with it, or something that we have developed. So with that said, this was not part of the book Dynamics of Change as much as we then developed afterwards. But as the leaders were saying, they would like to know how it connects to the regular change management, this material, but they also would like to have that, to be able to have that. And I don't know if I said that, but this checklist was made as a request. We would like to have something in our pocket, and as I said, this is remind me of the question I got from the CEO earlier. Now, above the surface you have the change, and what's really change management, the more tangible above the surface, and below the surface you have transformation and activities that you could do below that, and in the middle you have the documents and the outcome deliverables. So this is actually an overview of what kind of activities could you work with and remind yourself of. So it's a working document for HR professionals together with leaders and change agents to talk about the change and what are the things that we can work with. And below the surface you have different exercises which you find in both Get Connected and Dynamics of Change. And that is highlighting also that this is the opposite side of the same checklist, which is, I don't know if you heard that, but I said that this checklist is an A3 format paper which you fold down into an A6 format. I'll come back to that. It gives you some of the highlight headings, so to speak, and it also shows how the two books are actually completing or complementing each other to grow a shared culture and to lead people through change. Now, and this is maybe very quickly, I can say that this booklet is folded like this, and I hope that gives you enough instruction. And you can download the printable version, and you also have a digital version if you want to show it on the screen like I did. And it should be possible for you then to ask the printer or yourself to fold it so that you have this in your pocket. I found it very useful in my dialogue with leaders, and because it helps them to be able to overlook all the different steps, but also to get some ideas and tips of tools that they can use at the different times of the change. talking about dynamics and change and also get connected. I mean, you can see how the books are illustrated, that both are having a major part beneath the surface. It's more of recognizing that there is a life above the surface, but it's also a life beneath the surface. And these two books are giving you both theory and tools for how you work beneath the surface when you lead people through change, and also what you need to do in order to grow a shared culture. That's more of the long-term investment that you continuously work with. And then you bring up the dynamics of change when things are starting to be very turbulent around you, and maybe your identity and your security and safety is being threatened. The Get Connected has 25 tools, whereas Dynamics of Change only have 10 tools. And if we go back and look more to the 10 tools that are in Dynamics of Change, these are the ones. And I would say that of these tools, they are both individual, meaning that they are useful for you as an individual, and some of them are more of a collective, and some are both. And the first, the tool Psychological Contract, the first one, and the Support System, the fourth one here, is mainly aimed for your individual reflection and use. Whereas the Change Curve and the Diagnostic Questions is actually something for both you individually and also as a collective. The rest of them are mainly to be used in a collective dimension. But if I would like to mention some of these tools that are most important, it is for you to work with the diagnostic questions. How do your employees feel, or how do you feel yourself? And very simply, it is that you ask your team, how do you feel in relation to this change? And you also ask, do you have any energy leakages? Are your mind going somewhere else at the moment? You think about other things. Those two are diagnostic in the sense that it helps you to connect to your emotions as a human being in the times of change. But the last question is the more public one that you usually spend time in talking about, and what is the most important question for you right now in relation to this change? And what you do is that you actually surface what's going on beneath the surface, and gives you and provides you with the basics of what you need to know in order to be able to manage people through change. So with that said, of how the structure of the book looks like, I'd like to introduce Christoph. And thank you that I can hear you. I hope I didn't fall out too long in time. But you were short. Okay. Christoph, I'm very happy to have you share what's going on and how you work with this in Volvo at the moment, and give us some stories and insights that you have. So Christoph, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for thinking about us and to invite us for the seminar. Just for those who don't know me, I have been for more than 15 years at Volvo, and in the last years been focusing partly on facilitating lean initiatives and driving a lean mindset amongst our colleagues. But more important also, I've been working on the cultural organizational culture in our community, mainly to train and support our leaders and to facilitate and helping them to bond their team and also to deal with change in the best possible way. Now, when it comes to the book, The Dynamics of Change, I think you've mentioned already a lot why the book was there. So I'm going to skip that one, but focus more on the when and the how. And when it comes to the when, I can tell if you question when to use this book, I would say always. We all know that change is a constant thing nowadays, and you can actually use this book and its exercises throughout the whole length of a change. It's not because the end is in sight that you should lose your attention. So it's actually always to use. More looking on the how, and I'm not going to elaborate too much on the chapters because I'll be repeating you, Tor, but one thing I have found as very practical in those chapters, and is the thing that you mentioned there, the issues for reflection at the end of each chapter. because when a change announces itself and you are facing it, it's the moment that you could feel quite overwhelmed and even to a point of being paralyzed or get stuck on a certain thought or emotion. And that's where the issues for reflection come in very handy. They provide you a couple of questions which help you to enroll your thinking and to start reflecting in a certain direction. Just wanted to mention that. At what point or how exactly did we use the content of the book? We have embedded it in our cultural trainings that we provide to our leaders, in leadership seminars, which we have been driving in the past years. More recently, the Volvo Group University has also started with a Leading in Change program, where the exercises and the concepts from the book are actually taking a prominent role. So that's showcasing how we look inside Volvo towards the content of the book. After all those years that we've been working with it, it seems so essential that we've actually placed it in the middle of these trainings. We also use it in day-to-day workshop facilitation. It's anchored in process. But the most important and most powerful aspect is that we have managed over the years to get it that well in our fingers that we can use it day to day in our work, in collaboration inside a team and with other teams. And then looking actually at the exercises, and I just wanted to share a couple of facts that we have picked up from leadership seminars that we've had in the past year, 2 years, entirely focusing on change and transformation. And from the surveys, we've actually picked up that 93% of the respondents found the change tools, that they improved their capability to drive change. More than 85% found them actually quite easy to use, and more than 75% have managed to get started with the tools without any support from specialists like culture navigators or other roles in the organization that are very familiar with these tools. So that speaks very much in favor of the book itself and the tools, that it is quite easy to get started with it.
It makes me very happy to hear that. That's exactly what we were aiming for.
Yeah, data does not lie. Now, looking specifically at the exercises, there's a list of exercises, and just for your information, I'm not using slides here, so don't think that your visuals are getting frozen. I decided to do it without, and to just handpick 3-4 exercises that over the years have shown to be extremely powerful and quite easy to use. And the first one, which is by far the most powerful one, as we see it, is the change curve. From these surveys and the seminars, if they would use a tool, the people themselves, the leaders, 77% used the change curve. And the nice thing about the change curve is that it's not simply a tool, it's actually a concept that helps you to understand all the aspects of a change. So it has a bit of a twofold function. It creates an awful lot of awareness around change, what it does to the people, what it does to yourself as an individual, as a leader, and how you can use the other tools or even tools from the Get Connected book to facilitate change in a smoother way. I secondly pick also the diagnostic questions. The simplest tool of what we found in the book, and I always call this the thermometer. It's actually very swift in using, yet very powerful, and you immediately get a sort of sense of what is going on for yourself, for your people in the team, and the team completely in its totality. There are 2 tips that I could be giving on the diagnostic questions, and that is, first of all, make it your own. You could go drilling off the questions, but if you want to really ask those questions in a genuine and authentic way, you'll have to make them yourself a little bit in your own wordings, but with the same intention and purpose. And then it will be less formal, it will be more inviting for the people to, where you ask the questions to open up and share what is really going on inside them. And a last tip on this one also, be prepared for the worst, because you could ask how it is going, and if there are specific things that need to be brought to the table, it could well bring the elephant into the room, and then you need to be prepared to deal with this in a good and constructive way. Now, a very good example of these...
Sorry,
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the elephant in the room is actually an exercise that is in Get Connected, so you also have tips for how you take care of the elephant in Get Connected.
That's interesting. Okay.
Just a side note. Sorry for interrupting you. Yeah.
No problem. Thanks for pitching in there. But I wanted to come to a very good example that I saw with the change curve and the diagnostic questions. A year or two ago, we had a team that was visiting as an observer one of these change seminars that we were conducting. And a couple of weeks later, they contacted me on, yeah, we are facing a big change. How could we make best use of this? And of course, I'm not very tempted to go and tell them how they should do it, but more to think along with them to make sure that they brainstorm a bit on the possibilities with these tools to maybe practice. And a couple of weeks later, I actually turned back to them, and I was very positively surprised to see that on their weekly meeting, every occasion, they were using this change curve as a very swift exercise. They just draw it out on a whiteboard and positioned themselves. And it was not the position itself that was the essence of the thing, but the trend over the weeks, how they were evolving, who was taking a lead on the change curve, who was a bit behind, so that they could focus on getting the entire team through the change. And they did that in combination with the diagnostic questions to sense what the atmosphere was, if there were any energy leaks or fears that needed to be addressed. And the combination of these tools never took more than 5 to 10 minutes, but it gave them a fairly good view on the health of the team and how well they were capable of leading this change for their people. So that's a very good example on how flexible these tools can be applied in the field. Another tool that I really wanted to mention was the future dialogue. It's the last tool in the book. It actually makes use of a sort of quadrant where you plot out a lot of possible scenarios that might be large, small, into a grid where it is seen as preferred, non-preferred, and probable or not probable. And I have come across 2-3 teams in the past where we facilitated this exercise. And like I mentioned, people or even an entire team could feel paralyzed by the announcement of a change or the early stage. Not everything is clear yet. They are overwhelmed. They have a lot of question marks in their head, too few answers, and then they feel paralyzed, like being a victim of this change. If then you do a good brainstorming as a start of what could it turn out to be, this change, and you don't go judging, you select all, put it on the grid, you discuss it, it will refocus the energy of the team to things that are probable to happen and to push as much as possible in that area to a preferred situation. And that effect is that it helps the people to go from a feeling of victim to the change to a driver of the change. And again, their ball starts rolling. There is action. They move forward, take a next step. So these are a couple of examples on how we could pick tools to really give the team a sense that they are involved in this change as much as possible and that they can control probably much more as what they think at the start of a change. Another and that's really a funny example on how you can play around with the change curve, is that you can quickly do it as a 2-3 minute exercise to plot between two walls. Are you at the start or are you at the end? And that you ask your people to stand up and go stand between the two sides to see where are you in the change curve. And then trigger a dialogue from one to another. What will it take you to move to a next step? I've seen this work very well with the change curve. Once the people know the concept, it's a very fun way and interactive way, generating very good dialogue to use the change curve in that way. I could elaborate much more, but I think we need to leave some space here for some questions, stuff. So
Yeah,
I hope
exactly.
I've shared a bit
and we are
how we
both
work.
available afterwards in email or phones if you have further questions. I understand,
Yeah.
right? We're just going to show a slide here that is more of if you would like to get started and get some kind of guidance of how you can introduce the book into a management team. Here are some, I'm not going to go through this, but you can read this. It's quite self-explanatory of steps that you can take to get the management team rolling and using the work that is in the dynamics of change.